Hello, and welcome to another MainView for IMS Functions and Features training session. In today's session, we'll be talking about creating an application trace. My name is Mike Frost, and I am a software consultant with BMC. As we know, traces are effective tools for programmers who are trying to analyze response time issues as well as other issues. Today, I'll be showing you how to create a trace. Let's jump right into MainView. The first thing we want to do is access MainView from our systems. Once we're in MainView, we want to go ahead and select I for IMS. Then we want to use option 1, MainView for IMS Online. Here, we can set an individual context if we like, but for this example, we'll use all. We also want to use the default of BBCS, which is our CAS subsystem ID. Once we're in our IMS SSI Easy menu, we need to go to Traces. To find traces, you need to look under the transaction analysis. Here, you press PF8, which brings you down below, and then you select Traces. Once there, put your cursor on Traces and hit Enter. This brings you into the trace list. Here you can see a history of all the trace IDs that are currently on your system, whether active or unused. If we're going to run an application trace, we'll need to use the command st, or you can click on the Start Application Trace. Here we're going to click Start Application Trace and hit Enter. Now you'll see the current traces. However, you need to set a context to set a current trace. As you can see, we currently have a context of all. We need to, however, set a context for one single IMS. For this situation, we'll use IAGA IMS. So we'll do the command con IAGA IMS, and then we'll hit Enter. Now you can see our context has been set to IAGA IMS, and we can see our trace IDs below, the type, the user who created it, the title for the trace, the number of resources, the start date, start time, the status, log status, the time of the activity, end date, end time, target job name, the pass ID. If we hit PF11, we can also see the trace dataset name as well as the MVS ID and the trace status. So to start a trace, all we need to do is in the command line type ST, and then we hit Enter. Now we are given trace attributes to complete. So what we want to do is start to fill out some of the trace attributes. First, we will give a trace name. So for this example, we'll do test1. Here we want to use a detailed trace. We do not need to give it a start or stop time, but we could if we decided to. This is so we can narrow down to a particular hour or day. We can leave our storage at 500K. We don't need log tracing, but you can have that if you like. You have the option to wrap the buffer, which we will leave as yes. We want to use the restart as hot, and the QIS is yes. And then we'll give a title of our trace as workload test trace. Additionally, we want to provide specific additional trace options. To do so, we change these options to yes. So we want to have the ability for selection criteria, exception filters, as well as trace log dataset options. For additional trace targets, we can hit yes if we decide to, but for this example, we're going to use no. Now we hit Enter. Now we have the ability to specify selection criteria. We can go by program type, tran class, PSB, region, user ID, program, region ID, database, DB2 plan, BENS, VTM node, ICONIP, OTMA map, OTMA CORR, TMEM, as well as term. For this example, we'll just use a user ID, and we will use mine. Yeah. .xf. Now when we're finished, we hit enter. Here we could add additional information. We could edit the time, the number of DLI calls, number of SQL calls, miscellaneous counts, DCs, as well as FPs. But for this example, we use the default of blank. All we need to do is hit enter. Next, we can specify the trace log dataset options. Currently, we're set to 1 log. However, we want to use 2. So if we run out of space, we can automatically swap over to the new log without any issues. Next, we need to provide a first log DSN. For this example, we'll use bmc.scm.test.trace.v01. And you will see for the note below that we need to use v01 for all of our lower level qualifiers. This is to ensure we don't lose anything that we've been working for in the past. Now you do have the option to overwrite logs. We'll leave that as yes. You can archive the proc if you choose to do so. You can update the log switch time. You can update the disposition of the database or of the data set. You can identify the volumes, primary cylinders, data DSN suffix, SMS storage classes, SMS data class, and SMS manage class. However, here we'll just hit enter and we will take the defaults. Now we're on a final screen just to go over the options that we have provided. So as we can see, we do have parm of test 1. It's a detailed trace using 500K of storage. It is using log trace. The title is workload test trace. We haven't given it a start or stop time. Our wrap is yes, our restart is hot, and our QIS is yes. And we can see below that we did indeed give additional criteria and that those have been processed. So now to start the trace, all we have to do is hit enter. Now you'll see below, under trace ID, that the trace has started. So we have our trace test 1. However, just because we see this here doesn't mean that the trace has actually started. To ensure that it has, we need to wait a few seconds and ensure that our log status has gone to ACTV, which means that our trace is currently active. Additionally, you can PF11 to the right, and we can see our trace dataset name has been created. We can also see that the trace status is current. To go back, all you have to do is PF10. So currently, our trace is running. To stop the trace, all we need to do is come over to the command line on our trace and hit Z. This stops our trace and will send the information from the trace over to our historical traces view. Now you see the stop command has been issued. The trace will complete within a minute. We can see that the log status is now QIS and the time activity is 1. Now we just need to wait a few seconds and the status will change. Now we can see the status has changed to complete. We have our end date and time, and we have some additional information now to the right. If we PF10 back, we can see that the trace is complete. Now if we want to go back and view that trace, we can give the command HT. Now, in the historical trace view, we can see the trace that we ran today. Now, that trace was a short trace and an example of how to run it, but if we did want to see some information on a trace in the past, we can go to a trace that has a number of records. As you can see, ours had 0, but this one here has 6. And we can take a look at what's inside of the trace by giving it a S for select. Here we can see the tran codes, detail views, the count, the type of trace, the event count, response time, input queue, elapsed time, application percentage, DLI calls, DLI IO, ESS calls, total CPU, DLI CPU, DB2 CPU, latest end time, the class ID, the PSB name, the program name, and if we PF11, we can see additional information. Now if we PF10 and we go back to the beginning, we can do a few more things. We can add filter mask, we can remove filter mask, we can get an overview and a query of the trace, we can return to the trace menu, and we can expand the transactions. Here's a look at what expanded transactions would look like. Here we can see we have all of our tran codes and the transactions associated. To return to our trace menu, all we have to do is hit PF3 and then PF3 again, and that returns us to our historical traces. If you'd like to delete a trace that you've created, all you need to do is go to the trace and hit D for delete, and that will delete the trace. You can also print, verify, and archive all from here as well. So we will go ahead and delete that trace, and we'll hit enter, and now you can see that our trace has been deleted. So that covers our session on starting an application trace. We've looked at starting the trace, viewing the trace, and the options within. So I welcome you to like and subscribe our YouTube videos, like and subscribe to our page, the Mainframe Solution Systems Management. And if you are looking for more information on starting application traces and history traces, you can look at the documentation on our support website, which is bmcsupport.com. We thank you again for watching these videos, and if you have any questions, please reach out to BMC Support, and we thank you. Have a great day.